If you've ever played a game from Terarin, the hardest working shmup developer in Japan before, you will already know exactly what to expect from them, with that being a high quality but relatively simple to pick up throwback to earlier times, with stripped back but always clean graphics, a blistering sense of pace, and an absolute earworm of a soundtrack from longtime musical collaborator Hiroki. And that is exactly what you get here with Terra Flame. Of course, each Terarin game has had its own differences and wrinkles in play to make it distinct, and I would say Teraflame arguably does the most to stand out so far. For a start, it is the first Hori they've done since their first Switch outing Gemini Arms, and in terms of an inspiration, I would say that in this development cycle, Terarin has been mostly eating Thunder Force. It also uses more buttons than most of their other efforts, with 3 different shot types available to you at all times, as well as the ability to change your speed. Those 3 shot types are a forward shot, a rear shot, and a homing attack, with each assigned to their own button, allowing you to switch between them instantly and intuitively, something you will be doing a lot as enemies approach from in front and behind, or sit above and below you, forcing you to mix up your shots very frequently. When you start, each shot is relatively weak and narrow, but your first pickup will always be a roll unit, which adds 2 rotating options around your ship and greatly increases your shot coverage. You will also pick up shot power increases, with these being applied to all your shot types and maxing out at level 3. There is a little bit of Gradius syndrome at play here, because losing a life strips you of all your power-ups and can leave you coming back into play in a very weak state. There is a shield pickup which protects you from 3 hits before expiring, but in some ways this only makes losing a life feel even more punishing, as if it happens during a boss fight for example, you can end up facing a quick chain of deaths while doing very limited damage with your pea shooter, whereas pick up a shield just beforehand and taking the same amount of hits will leave you still at full power and able to dispatch the boss in rapid time, despite the quality of your play being basically the same. There's also a slightly overpronounced stop each time you take a hit to your shield, although this is something you quickly get used to. In stages, recovery is usually far more manageable, with pickups often being quite generous, although sometimes a little uneven, with stage 5 for example showering you with shields, while certain other, in my opinion, more difficult stages are far more stingy. Now, outside of your regular shots, perhaps the most interesting mechanic at play is the charge meter, with this actually being an almost inverse charge, by which I mean it's not holding down your shot that sees the bar increase, but rather abstaining from shooting that does so, with constant firing bringing it down. It took me a little bit to appreciate how important this bar was, as this is not a case of maxing the bar out and then unleashing one special charged shot, but rather a constantly rising and falling gauge whose ebb and flow is to be more organically managed by only firing when you need to, something that will take those of you who, like me, tend to just hold down rapid fire at all times some getting used to. It is important to pay attention to how this gauge affects your shots and how quickly it allows you to take down enemies however, and once you start getting used to it, this style of fire and release starts feeling very natural and gives the game a nice rhythm and sense of flow. It also plays into the game's scoring system, which is based around chaining enemy kills, with the chain counter dropping at a pretty rapid rate, meaning you really do need to be taking enemies out in quick succession to get into the higher numbers. The reason the fire and release method plays into this system is that you'll often have situations where you have, say, a formation of 4 enemies roll onto screen, followed a second later by another 4. If you just smash the first 4 instantly, however, the gap to the next formation will be just long enough to break your chain, and if you're playing for score, the optimal tactic is often to fire off a short salvo to take out just a couple of enemies, let the remainder get halfway across the screen before taking them out, and then do the same for the next formation that now arrives with your chain still intact. There are further floating score bonus pickups as well, as a bunch of stage end bonuses, and while the scoring system isn't a particularly complex one, it is engaging enough to add a further layer to the regular gameplay. Not that the regular gameplay is lacking without it though, because this is probably the Terarin shmup that has the most stage variety so far, both in terms of formations and hazards as well as in appearance. As mentioned, the 3 shot types allow enemies to come in from all around you, and you won't just have the occasional enemy sneaking in from behind, but large numbers of them, so that the possibility is always on your mind, rather than being the nasty surprise it can be when used more sporadically. You're also going to see a lot of turrets hanging from ceilings or the underside of ships in certain stages, necessitating the use of your homing shot, with one stage featuring progress through narrow corridors and another seeing arcing fireballs periodically, locking you into a smaller area with less room for manoeuvre. And all in all, the game keeps you on your toes constantly by mixing things up throughout a complete run. This extends to the visuals, with a wider selection of distinct spaces than seen in previous Terarin games. Each location is still relatively simple, but they also have more noticeable themes, such as the inside of an enemy space fortress, an asteroid belt, or the surface of the moon. And although the use of colour and detail is still sparse, there is enough to make you remember each stage more clearly one from the other than in previous games. It would still be nice to see one of these games spruced up properly, of course, but in that regard we may not have long to wait, as the next game Terarin is involved in, Star Ganyant, a bigger collaboration this time, is out on the 25th of May and looks to have all their hallmarks in terms of speed and thrill, while being given more colour and personality on the presentation front. But enough about that one, we will hopefully come to that next month. For now, let's quickly turn to the meta options in Terra Flame, which are, again, as usual, pretty excellent for such a small project. You have 3 difficulty modes, normal, hard and expert, although these are more accurately easy, normal and hard. And each time you start a game you can choose to begin from any previously reached stage. There's also a 3-minute caravan mode that is a lot of fun, and all modes come with both local and online leaderboards. There is, as always, an excellent catchy soundtrack that even when you hear each stage's theme for the first time, you will often swear you've heard before, so instantly memorable is it. And the game also offers a chiptune variant in the options. So basically, the long and the short of it is, this is yet another great game from a developer who never seems to tire of firing out these fun, classic and always finely tweaked little hidden gems. As mentioned, it would be nice to see one of these games given a bit more oomph and character on the presentation front, and the recovery from deaths at certain points can cause a bit of frustration, but the core gameplay is on point, and as usual this has that trademark breakneck pace that barely gives you a chance to catch your breath from start to finish, while also bringing a few more flourishes and bits of style to the table than most previous games. I would give Terra Flame an 8 out of 10 overall, and I do also recommend taking a look at Terarin's previous games if you haven't already, as well as keeping your eye out for Star Ganyant when it arrives in late May. Do let us know your thoughts on this one, as well as your general thoughts on Terarin's output on Switch. This is already the 5th game they've released on the system, and I've no doubt they will already be hard at work on their next one. So as ever, thanks a lot for watching. See you next time. Cheers.